I had forgotten what I look like. A big woman. That's what Larry from the bar in Louisville called me. "Damn," he said, "that's a big woman." I seared to a stop, my heart in my teeth, his face a smear beneath my heel already. I could feel my blood on fire. I could feel myself inspired to kill a motherfucker. I was aghast, agog, alarmed, unhinged, singed by the burn. I turned, I could have smacked him, but instead, I laughed because I had forgotten what I looked like. A big woman. A big woman that Larry from Louisville wants to fuck. Forget all I've projected. In him I am reflected raw and wide. He'll tan my hide if I will let him. He wants to get all up in that. My ass and tits and rolling fat. He wants to crawl inside my curves and suckle mama's honey till it's gone. At the school in South Central, I was finger licking. I was Kentucky Fried Chicken. I was a tall drink of water pulling eyes. "Damn, Miss Moore, you got some fine-ass cakes," said James, 17, and unconcerned. You know, you can't talk to your teacher that way. You can't just say all the things I'm dying to hear from a peer, preferably, over a 17-year-old minor. That's one of the finer things in life. Inappropriate compliments from underage students. A little prudence, please. Geez, James, 30 years of guilt and shame you're up against. And you suppose that you can just blow open all the windows with a few crass words? How am I supposed to pretend like I don't have an ass if you say that it's fine and call it a cake? I quake with the knowledge that people have eyes and they can use them to see me. I'm not invisible. But in this culture, I can trick myself. I can vanish altogether. I can walk down the street in white neighborhoods and never turn a head. Oh, am I allowed to observe that white guys don't dig me? But West Africans line up for a chance to palm my hips, to crush my lips, to pull me past velvet ropes in London clubs after hours, that Spaniards will take me standing in showers, that Brits will pull me to their beds before they've even fed me. The American, barbaric, and Caucasian evades this Venus flytrap only. Sure, everyone is haunted. The skinny, the strong. The irony of obesity has been obvious all along. The weightiest are empty, and empty folks are fat. It's just as crude as that. Else why would we shove the food, the hot, the cold, the bland, the bold, the fucking lot, the cold, the hot, so far deep down our throats, if not to ease the aching bloat of empty? Tempting to not talk about it. I'm tempted not to think about it. But for a change, I'll rearrange the habit of ingestion and get the information out. I am a big woman. I have always been this way. I dream about being a head on a stick, a brain with feet, a thing that thinks but needn't feel. I try to hide my size, more so even than my mind, more so even than the grinding of the gears, the way I operate in fear, the self I'm certain will repel you. More than that, I hate the fat. I want to crush it underfoot. I want to carve it from my corpse. I want to shut your eyes. I want to vaporize. It's the strangest thing. I have this skinny friend, and she is seeking that same end for herself. So, how are we to reconcile this universal hatred? What lubricant will buffer this metal touching metal? I am fed up with my own voice more than any other. I just want to discover that thing that can't exist. The right size, the right shape, the right weight. In Thailand, I shopped for fisherman pants to keep my head above water. And the female shopkeeper was 5'4", a size 2. She took my hand and she stroked my arm. "So cute," she murmured in uncertain English. Before I could react, she pressed both palms against my stomach flesh. She explored my every curve. "So cute," she said again. Her eyes were hungry and her fingers sped. "I want to look like you," she said. Thank you. So, my name is Andrea Moore, and I'm a social artist. So I use writing, performance, and photography to foster dialogue and connection across social and cultural lines. It means that I'm interested in art as a vehicle for other things, as a vehicle for conversation, for connection, for doing work, for advocacy. That was an adult thing that I arrived at. That wasn't always where I was, right? When I was younger, I totally wanted to be famous. But later, it evolved. So, when I wrote that piece, when I started that piece, I was 25. I'm 35 today. I was 25, and I will tell you, I was a much bigger woman than I am now. And I tell you this because in the next several minutes, we're going to confront all of the judgments we all have about whether or not I'm big enough to perform this piece. Yeah? Okay. Good. Thank you. So let me tell you a little bit about my process writing the piece, and then we can talk about what it's like to perform a piece like that, and to present my body as the subject of the bigness, right? So when I first started writing, I was 25. I was visiting a friend in Louisville, Kentucky, and we're at the bar, and we're getting drinks, and we're walking through, and this guy just turns around and lets me have it. Damn, that's a big woman. And I wanted to die. But I felt a cultural obligation to make him feel better. So I smiled, and I turned, and I laughed, and I introduced myself to Larry. And I was confused, and I had the moment, and I couldn't process it at that time, but it's a moment I've had many times throughout my life. I had the moment of realizing that truly Larry was viewing me with pleasure and honor and awe. And that all of the things that weren't pleasure, honor, and awe were self-attributed, right? That I thought, big woman, I heard an insult, and he said a compliment. And this disconnect has happened to me many times throughout my life. So I knew that something had happened. It got my attention, how quickly I went from wanting to kill him to wanting to make it right and wanting to make it easier for him. So I wrote the first 5 lines of that poem, and then I was like, fuck that, and I put it in a drawer, and I was like, I'm not actually ready to tell that story at all, right? I was 25, I was not ready to tell that story. I put it away, and I kept on living my life. And I kept, and I had all these narratives and stories, and I think a lot of us may, about, well, here's the primary one. And it's so obvious, and all of those of you who know me, it's so obvious. Like, I was just so consumed with this idea that I was too smart to have any kind of interaction with, like, diet culture and smallness and wanting to be a certain way for American mainstream or Western mainstream culture, right? I was too smart for that. And a smart woman wouldn't engage with the mainstream media in such a way. So my only option then was not to diet, not to try to be anything, just to sort of cut everything off. Everything below the neck is a haze, right? It's all just the brain with the feet. Somehow I move around the world, but that I became a talking box, right? That I cultivated this idea of ideas and intelligence and presence, and all of these other things that did not make me smaller at all. So life kept passing. And then when I was 30, I went to Thailand with my family, my siblings and my mom. And we went as a family to go. My father had passed away from pancreatic cancer about a year or 2 years before that. So we went on this family holiday, and we went away, and we were spending time together, and we were in the middle of our own hilarious debacle, which is another story about how do you transport dead people's ashes across the globe, and will they think it's drugs, and will they not, and how do you all negotiate that? And because there are always many stories at a time, right? We can never just have one story. So, and I am in Thailand, and my brother and I are shopping for fisherman pants. And we're in the shop, and this little tiny girl, and she's like completely the American-looking version. I mean, she's Thai, but she has the body that I always wanted. She is petite, tiny little waist. It looks easy. It looks like she can stuff her face with any fucking thing she wants and never change, right? And I'm like, there it is. There's that banging little bod, that I'll never have. And this really happened, that she took my hand and she started to stroke my arm. And it was weird, right? Like that, it wasn't an ordinary thing to have happen. That was not an ordinary moment. And my brother's standing right next to me too, and he's just like, dude. And I'm like, dude, I know. And, you know, but I mean, witnesses are important to have in such moments. So she's stroking my arm, and I'm like trying to understand because she doesn't speak English, and she keeps saying, so cute, so cute. And I'm like, cute? And at this time, when I was 30, I was the biggest I had ever been. I will tell you how big soon enough. I was the biggest I had ever been. And she's stroking my arm, and then went right in, both hands on my stomach. Literally in the curves. Rolls are here, you know, all those places, the muffin tops, place we try and hide. Like, let me see if I do high-waisted jeans all the way up to here. Maybe all of these things can like get somewhere and we can hide it, right? She's all up in it, you know, touching all of it. And I'm just like, it happened so fast, I don't even know how to react. So I'm just sort of like, whoa. And my brother's like, whoa. And she looked me dead in the eye and said, with such hunger, I want to look like you. And something in me snapped, right? I had a light bulb, wake-up call moment. And I thought to myself, every person on this planet, here we all are, casting these lines across the world at some idea of rightness that I will never have, right? A skin tone, a height, a frame, a body style, you know, an idea of, and again, all of this in an ableist worldview too, of course, right? Let's not even deal with that. All inside just the mainstream idea of perfection and beauty. All of us throwing them across, but all of us. It's not like there's that one club of the right ones who are just like, we're good. You know, like, no, it's cool. I'm fine. You know? But which had truly never occurred to me before. It had never occurred to me that there were people who didn't know their own rightness, right? And that was a complete fabrication and projection. So I was ready. I was ready to deal with the poem. So I went back and I pulled it out of that drawer and I was like, okay, let's get all the way up in this. Let's start talking about it and let's talk about race. Let's talk about the difference between white men and what white men like and black men and what black men like and brown men and what brown men like, right? And about a booty on a brown woman and a booty on a white woman and all of these different ideas of shape and size that I didn't fucking understand, right, at all. When I was living in LA and working in South Central, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about things that I ultimately didn't understand. I just was exposed to a world that I hadn't been exposed to before. And I understood that like my idea of rightness was completely subjective. So I started getting into that content and writing it, you know, and I got to this place and I was like, yeah, and it felt so freeing. It did, and I won't pretend that it didn't. It felt awesome. It felt awesome to get to a place where I was like, you know what? I am proud to tell this story, and I'm going to tell everybody now. and I can do it. And I'm loud, and I'm proud, and I'm big, and I'm beautiful, and I'm going to get up there and tell that story. And so in January of that year, I started performing that piece live, and I got up in all of my bigness, and I got on stages, and I started doing that story feeling really proud of myself, right? Really self-satisfied of like, now I can own it, and as long as I own it, then somehow I'll be protected from this deeper truth, which is that I'm still not acceptable. But as long as I say it first, then nobody can hurt me. And so I performed the piece twice. And the second time I performed it, it was for a group of friends, and one of them, and at a bigger venue, but a group of friends were there, and one of my girlfriends was there from high school. So she had known me since I was 16. And there's a part in the poem where I say, I am a big woman. I have always been this way, right? And she came up to me after the night was over, and she approached me, and very tenderly, but honestly, she said, I love you, and you have not always been this way, which was really hard to hear. Because, of course, that part was critical to the story, right? It was critical that I had always been that way if I was going to have any kind of self-acceptance around it. So it pierced this really fragile, brittle narrative that I had created around bigness and pride. Because if I hadn't always been that way, then what was it about? And if I was still as smart as I ever was, then was I actually unhappy? What? Oh God. Oh God, was I actually unhappy and just doing the thing that everybody knows we're all doing, which is eating our feelings? Is it really that fucking simple after all? Was I really just fucking eating my feelings and not just bigger than you by nature? Something so simple was so terrifying to me. But my stepsister had joined, 6 weeks earlier, my stepsister had joined Weight Watchers. And at the time, she was like, hey, I'm going to join Weight Watchers. Do you want to do it with me? And I was like, fuck no, right? Definitely not. Like, no, I don't want to do that. At the time, I have a lot, you can tell this about me, I have a lot of opinions. Most of them aren't rooted in any kind of experience at all, right? So, but I will give you a hard yes or a hard no, and then I'll do the research later. So I was like, hell no, I'm not joining Weight Watchers. Weight Watchers is, here comes the opinion, for middle-aged, unhappy divorcees, right? That was my Weight Watchers thing. I was like, that's so 80s. Why would you do that? And like, which is probably just how old I was the first time I heard of it, right? Like that's how these things get like rooted. So here it is 6 weeks later, and I've just been called out by one of my best friends. And my stepsister, meanwhile, is 6 weeks into her program, has lost 10 pounds, is looking great, feeling awesome. And I was like, well, I'm a jackass, right? So hence the delayed research. I was like, she's right. And the very next day, I joined Weight Watchers. My first weigh-in, I was 279 pounds. What? This is my grandmother. I think there's something about being there's something to I knew we would have this moment. I think for any tall women, and maybe men too, I'm not sure about the tall men experience, but for some of the tall women in the house, you'd be surprised what I can carry that you don't know I'm carrying, right? I'm like, my experience of a weight, of pounds, is very different than a woman, 6 inches shorter than me. I can carry some weight at 5'11", 6'1" in heels. And it's not always as evident to people, which should tell me that numbers are these arbitrary things, right? That should tell me that numbers are arbitrary. It absolutely doesn't. Of course not. No, numbers are everything. So I was 279 pounds, and I started the process. Over the next 18 months, I lost 100 pounds. 100. I love it. No, thank you. It was fucking hard. Okay? It was hard. But there's more, because there's so many stories, right? So over the course of that, so a few things happened. First of all, the first 40 pounds, I didn't feel any different. I didn't see a difference. I didn't notice a difference. Nothing changed. People started giving me feedback. Wow, have you been losing weight? Blah, 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 blah. Then there's this interesting thing of being in process with self-shift, where we all do this culturally, where we feel it necessary to let people know that we see that happening, right? Because we are physical selves. So you're going to make a physical self shift. Well, I get to talk about it. And maybe that's true. I don't know. But we do that to each other. It's like, you look one way, now you look a different way, so I'm just going to say it out loud in case nobody else noticed. Okay? So I started getting a lot of feedback of like, oh, wow, you're losing weight, you look great, right? Because losing weight equals great, until that one really fine line where then suddenly it doesn't anymore, and then it's like, oh my God, she's losing weight, right? I don't know nobody knows where these lines are, but we know them once we cross them. So I never thought I was as big as I was. I see photos now, and I don't remember being that person ever. In my head, it took 40 pounds before I caught up to what I thought I looked like anyway, right? So I was essentially still the same person 40 pounds in. It took another 40, and I still felt like the exact same person. So by now I had lost 80 pounds, which is essentially where I am now. Because the thing about the game is once you get in the game, it's not a hard landing. But so that gives you an idea of the difference, right? Of being like 80 pounds bigger than I am right this second. And at that, you know, I still felt like a fat girl. I was still the same person. I had zero difference interfacing with the world. Zero difference. And the world had completely changed how it interfaced with me. Completely. Completely. And one of the first things I noticed, because I had only performed that poem twice, is like the third or fourth time, and I don't perform that often. I'm a long-form poet, and so I'm not performing out every week, you know? So the next time I performed it, I was probably about, 6 or 8 months into my weight loss journey, and afterwards had this really interesting moment where a woman in the audience was like, I'm sorry, but to be frank, I just don't think that you're that big, and I just don't know why you're identifying as a big woman. And I was like, so many things happened. I was like, fucking awesome! Like, yes! Like, I've arrived, you know? And then I just was like, wait a minute. Who's making these rules? That's really interesting. How big is big enough? And I'm curious, let's take that moment of those of you who don't know my story and don't know me, whether or not you had that moment of like, really? Oh, a big girl, huh? Oh, you're real big. Yeah? She's like, I'm going there. Absolutely with me. Show of hands. That's it. Because when I was a bigger woman, anyone who wasn't as big as me wasn't a real big woman. Only I and people bigger than me were big women, right? I was the line. So wherever I went, there I was. Right? Totally. Yeah, so I put the poem down. Because then I had this other weird thing of like, fuck, I don't want to fuck with other big women. I'm still a big woman. I don't want to do that to another big woman. I don't want to make a big woman feel even bigger because if I'm a big woman, then she must be a fucking really big woman. Do you know what I mean? I was like, I don't know if I get to wear that badge because if I wear it, what does her badge mean now? Every badge that we wear affects the badge of the person next to us. That's how identity circles work. Of course, nobody talks about it. It's not written down, right? But I think that's how it works. So I put the poem to rest. I put it away. I wasn't done with it, but I had to put it away. Then came a really interesting part of the process. About 80 pounds into my weight loss, all of a sudden, boys happen. Even white ones. Which is always a surprise. And I started getting catcalled on the street. And I was like, yeah, baby, jackpot. And had multiple reactions at once, of course. Like at first I'd be like, oh my God, yes. That's enough, right? Right? Because I'm still a smart girl, right? And smart women know that that's objectifying. I had been dying to be objectified. It's funny only because it's so fucking true. I had been dying to be objectified. My entire life, from puberty on, I had never felt objectified sexually, ever. I had no idea how to do it. No idea what was expected, how I was supposed to behave, how other women behaved under similar circumstances. I started paying attention to what other women were doing. I was like, what are you doing? Watching other women, just ignore it. Or be like, fuck you, asshole, blah, blah, blah. You know, seeing like this whole spectrum. And I was like, there aren't any rules. Some women are doing that. Some women are doing this. Like, what do I want to do? I kind of want to jump into bed with him. Wait a minute. I don't know if, you know. I went to Turkey and Greece by myself to shoot their wedding. I went, and so I got to go to Greece to shoot a wedding, and so I was like, I'm going to go a little bit longer. I'm going to go alone. I love to travel. I'm going to do, you know, all these things and explore the world, and Turkey, amazing, and Greece, and da-da-da. So I'm going, and I'm like, I'm in me at this point, because I do that well. I do travel well, right? I do exploration well. I do the unknown well. So I'm in my shit, and I'm journaling at little fucking cafes and all that shit, right? And building my little book with like tickets and like ephemera and all of those things. And I am a fucking guy magnet. Dudes are pouring out of the fucking woodwork to come and talk to me. And it's intoxicating. And I have no idea how to deal with it. And I'm traveling as I go from Istanbul to Athens to Delphi. I'm going around. I'm going to this island. I sleep with 3 men in 16 days. That's how I, thank you, yeah, thank you. You know, because I never had that story. I never got to do that. And I was like, slut shaming, I was like, give me a chance. Like I was so desperate to know myself as a physical person, as a sexual person. I was so desperate to interact with people that way and with society that way. And because I had spent so much time worrying about being a really intelligent, blah, 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 talking head with a chip on my shoulder, I wasn't really hung up about all that other shit, right? I was like, fuck, it's not a big deal, right? But then I came back, and you know, and that kind of kept going back even in America. But a couple weird things happened. One, I was with actually an American guy. One of the men that I met on that fateful trip was an American man we met in Delphi in Greece, and he was astonishingly good looking, right? The kind of man that I would always have thought was completely out of my league. Right? These self-defined leagues that we place ourselves in. I mean, completely. And we were just like flirting and, you know, going around Delphi and visiting and doing this thing. And there were some other tourists nearby, and these tourists that were nearby were big. And he leaned over and he whispered in my ear, and I swear to you that I have completely blocked it out because I literally cannot tell you what he even said to me. But it was about them and how fat they were. And it short-circuited my brain. Because so many things happened at once, right? On the one hand, I had genuine horror first, because I tried to the best of my ability just not to be an asshole like that, right? No matter what my physical experience in the world is. So I had genuine horror, and then I was like, oh my God, he doesn't think that I'm like them. Of course, in that moment, I wasn't proud of that. I was just astonished. He doesn't think I'm like them. He's treating me like a thin person. This must be what it's like to actually be thin. He's treating me differently. I'm like seeing this window to this world that I only feared existed. And then that was the next thought, right? Was, oh my God, my worst fears as a bigger person, like, my worst fears about what people were thinking and saying and whispering may have been true. Like, some people are doing that. Some people are making those comments. Some people are pointing and laughing and, are living like that. And it was so sobering just to realize that on the one hand, I was like, wow, I can be in this club that doesn't really exist, right? But like, I can be in this, I can have an experience that I've never had. And at the same time, like, oh my God, it's actually as bad. Like, because I think a lot of time with fear, we would like to believe that our fears are just projections of the worst case scenario, and they're not ever real, right? They're not, nothing's actually as bad as we think it is, right? That was really scary. That was really scary. And I came back home, and, and that, the good things kept happening. And for a little season, I was having fun, right? And I was like, wow, all right. And I kept kind of like waiting, though, for the thing to happen. I didn't know this. I didn't know I was doing it, but I was like, kept waiting. I was like, something's going to happen. Something's going to, like, I'm going to arrive. I never even had a goal in Weight Watchers. I lost 100 pounds, and I was still higher than my BMI, okay? So, that. But, and that was still 20 pounds less than I am now. Keep that in mind, too. So that system's working. But I kept still thinking, like, oh yeah, okay, I'm doing all this work for a reason. I'm going to arrive. This wasn't conscious, but I believed I would arrive somewhere where I'd be like, yeah, that was worth it, right? And I was getting that male attention, and I had a younger man interested in me, and that was really exciting, and like all these different things were happening. And yet, even inside of that, I still didn't get picked, right? And it revealed this expectation that I didn't know I was carrying, which is that despite everything, I still totally thought that I would get skinny and get a boyfriend, right? I 100% totally fucking believed that if I were thin enough, that I would get a boyfriend. It seems like that's what I'm hearing, right? I did a lot of work. I lost a lot of weight. I got a lot of attention. And I was still fundamentally unacceptable in a way that I couldn't understand or even identify. Right? I'm 35, and I've been chronically single my entire life, my whole life. I've had entanglements and lovers and enmeshments, right? These things that we feel really, I have to hold on to them because for me, that's my history. That's my relationship experience. So, on my first date, I'm like, oh, what about you? What about your last relationship? I'm like, oh, let me drag out ex-lover number. I don't know what to tell you. I've never had a boyfriend except for 1 month when I was 19. And I totally thought, and it's hard having this relationship with it, like, it's not fucking worth this work. This is too hard. I don't know what I'm doing this for. I'm still trying to get validated. Fuck my life. I'm too fucking smart for this. I'm still trying to get validated by external sources. Still. I'm getting, oh, you look so pretty, you look this, you look like a movie star. Who cares? I'm lonely. I want a boyfriend. And I started to eat. Not even so much like, not like this has never happened, but not even so much like late night, like, oh, no, like binging on the ice cream, kind of like, fuck it, it's not worth it, blah, blah, blah. Like, it wasn't even that conscious. It was almost, it was more conscious than that. It wasn't so like, I'm sad, I'm gonna eat, which it had been part of my process. The problem with waking up is that you stay awake. It is much harder to go back. Right? So when I woke up to a lot of my eating shit, it's like I just don't have that shit in my house anymore. I just don't have a lot of those bad habits anymore. So now when I eat, I'm like, yep, I'm more comfortable back where I was because this shit is fucked up. I am not happy here. I don't like this kind of attention and not knowing the rules. And all these people seem to know the rules, and I don't know the rules, but I know the rules about being a big girl. I know how to be a fat girl. Let me go back. And I started gaining a little bit more weight. And it's confusing, you know, and going back and forth with that, and it wasn't even so much a yo-yo, you know, I just stopped tracking. I dropped Weight Watchers. I never hit goal. I really like my Weight Watchers leader. We hang out. She texts me. We text each other sometimes. You know, but like, I just was like, what else is there? Like, is there a softer way? Is there a softer way for me to be in my own skin, you know? And I listen to what everybody always says, right? Everybody's like, well, it's when you're not looking for it that things tend to blood. I'm sorry. Can we just agree to murder everyone? Because, like, we just need to agree to murder everyone. But like, I get it. And one thing you can count on me for, I'm a workhorse. I will work. If you give me a line and you tell me to tow it, I can tow it, right? So I can do that work. But I'm like, okay, so fine. So yeah, I'm supposed to work out. I'm supposed to run. I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to focus on my career. So that's what I did, you know? I was like, well, you know, the nice thing about being a little bit older is like finally people start taking you a little bit seriously, right? And that's nice, actually, right? And especially as an artist, there's something about like turning 30 and just being like, all of a sudden people are like, oh, right, you're 30, great. Well, what we're thinking is blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like there was like a thing that happened where like in my 20s, it's like, oh, cute, right? And then all of a sudden, it's like if you made it to your 30s and you're still alive and you're still calling yourself an artist, people are like, damn. Like, you must really have something special, like insanity, to keep in it that long. But they started taking me seriously. So I was able to focus on career, and I was able to like build a business and start thinking about ideas and purpose and what else do I want to be besides this physical thing, you know? But it's like, it's complicated and it's annoying and it's too much pressure to just always act like these things make sense, right? To try and capture the cycle of shame and self-loathing. It's too much pressure to pretend like it all makes sense. Like, you know, so maybe there's this particle, right? Maybe there's some point, some place inside the chaos at which all of this stuff makes sense. And if I just keep researching long enough and digging deep enough, that maybe I'll find it. But for now, I release the need to know, right? I have to let that go. So there's this place, as I was on my path trying to figure out self-care, beyond just transformation. What does self-care mean? People always talk about meditation. Should I meditate? People talk about yoga. People have been talking to me about yoga for a long time. And I am not going to do it. I'm not there yet. I will let you know if I am going to get into some yoga. I will let you know. So for me, I have to come open, not quite broken, to the temple. It is a hot and wet and steaming temple. And it is a place I go to respect this riddle of being a spiritual self, but in a material mold. It's a place that I go to hold space for sacred questions. It's a bathhouse called Lake Steam on West Colfax Avenue in Denver. It is Ladies' Day, a Monday afternoon, and I am naked in the tiled room. I am waiting in line for Mercy. She is busy most days. Women waiting for her to touch them, scrub them, soap them, salt them. Women waiting for her to touch them. Mercy is grace, a gift we do not need to earn in order to deserve. She is naked. I am naked. When I lay face down on her table, she must reach to scrub the far side of my back, and it buries my face in her belly. She's sliding against me, and her skin slips across my skin, and we are skin, and not ideas. We are not statements, not postures, not pillars. We are flesh. We are manifest. We are slippery when wet. We are real. She buffs the calluses off my feet and the chip off my shoulder, her hands circling my breasts. She rubs my belly like she's washing clothes in a river, thorough and efficient. She grips me, she grabs me, she gets me. The full length of my life, Mercy has stood in the steam, dismantling our self-hatred. I do not know her clothed. Naked at a bathhouse in Idaho Springs, my cousin weeps. It is Thursday evening, and she asks me, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is all this worth it? To pull back the veil and keep on pulling like a snakeskin, like a hangnail. Is it worth it? To stake our tent down, to stay in the game and not bring the axe down? My cousin asks me if it's worth it, and I shake my head no, and I say yes, yes, because it's this or drown. So I say yes. I arrive at the altar of mercy to pay homage, to acknowledge that I am born of yearning. I have a holy wound of longing, that long cord longing to be retracted back to wholeness, belonging. Soap and warm water remind me that I am made of dirt. I will return to dirt. I am earth and not air. I am here and not somewhere. I wait in line when I have to. I'm not in a hurry. I'm not the only woman waiting. There are old women, young women, black, brown, and gold women, pink, red, and white, wrinkled and tight, women taut and tiny-chested, bigger women, bigger-breasted, mounds and curves that boldly bounce, bellies spreading and pronounced, folds and bulges, crinkled pouches, innies and outies and varicose veins, bruises and bushes and landing strip lanes, cellulite that pocks and ripples, tattoos and every kind of nipple. We are women hungry. We are women thirsty. Together we wait to be touched by mercy. It is Tuesday afternoon. I've just finished teaching, and I sit with Adriana, who has bandages on her wrists, and I talk about cutting like it's a thing we all do. Because you know what? It is a thing we all do. Somehow, at some point, with some blade, somehow, it is a thing we all do. And I talk about cutting and about the pendulum between I want to wake up and I want to die, die, die. And I offer what I can, which is maybe just enough for now, but never really quite enough at all. And she asks me if it's worth it. She means about art, but we're talking about life, because there is no difference between the how we are living and between the living and the how we are living. So I say art is a wheel and axle, trampling the weeds of worry and whatever else in its path to freedom. Art is a mystery and a machine, and like any weapon, I tell her, it must be wielded, but it won't be owned. I tell her when she wants to pick up a razor, she should pick up a pen. It's a platitude, maybe, but I actually do mean it. It saved my life. It might save hers. Sunday morning, and a woman named Molly is crying on my sofa. She cries because she loves a man she doesn't want to love. A man whose capacity she exceeds without trying. And she knew this from the beginning, but now she loves him, and it hurts when he wants to let her go. She asks me if it's worth it to pry herself open, to try not to clamp down on her pain, stubborn as an oyster. I tell her sometimes mercy feels like malice, that the heart bleeds even as it blooms. A man can take a blade and hold it carefully between his finger and his thumb. He'll snip the bud so it cannot be resown to stem. But women, we prefer running with scissors, gathering crumbs and calling them cake because, well, they once had been cake, and maybe they could be cake again if we could just gather all the pieces back together again. The only thing that women hate more than men is other women. We disparage our parts and prettiness. We poison our hearts with pettiness. We are sisters and sworn enemies, alike but unlikely to align. We want to be better. We wish we were kinder. And so we are waiting for mercy. Sick in our envy of each other's skin and hair, swooning and swelling with pleasure as we imagine how we'd carve her with a thin hat pin, how we'd flay the flatness of her belly and skewer her shining eyes. We despise her for her shape, her pornographic mouth ajar. She's so fucking hot, and the thought of her riding him invades my flaming mind until fuck her! Fuck! There's one thing for certain. We know we cannot trust women. They only want their own hearts healed. But we can only trust women because they've been used as we've been used, and so we yield to this paradox. It exhausts us and confounds us, and so we are begging for mercy. We come naked. We come with nothing but our palms up, soaking wet in our surrender. We beg for mercy to cleanse us of our brokenness, to scrub us of our vanity, restore us to our sanity. We know we're smarter than this. We know we're not supposed to care. We know we're supposed to embrace our shape, salute the sun, go on gentle fucking walks, eat kale, but we fail. We fail at thinking our way out of feeling unacceptable. It isn't a balm that we know better. We can't get good at this. We can only get wetter. We can only get hotter. We can only sweat and hope that it's holy. We can steam ourselves into a dream, sink into the hot tub and pretend that it's a crawfish broil, a cauldron made by women who were witches and wise. We can scald shame from our skin and contempt from our eyes. We can pray and beg for mercy, thrust our heart into her hands, crying, mercy, can you save us from how much we fucking hate us? Mercy, can you tell us we're enough just as we are? Mercy, will you make us touchable and lovable, free and fully fuckable? Mercy, are we monsters? Can you bring us back to life? There are women, many women. Women in college, in meetings, in church basements, in bathhouses and coffee bars. These women, they ask me if it's worth it to go the long way round the bend, upend the status quo. They think I know because I've been scorned, felt like I died and was reborn. I have transformed, burned and turned to ash, fed on tears and searing hope, broke open my own heart to start again and again. I have done this again and again. And so the women ask me if it's worth it because they think I know the answer. But all I do is I find another woman and I ask her the same thing. I find Edith in Uganda washing my laundry by hand. Diane in the corner office with the purple crystal in her palm. Jennifer Rose and Maura Jean and mothers and great-grandmothers and grandmothers and Mercedes, who they call Mercy. And I ask them, Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is all this worth it? To pull back the veil and keep on pulling like a snakeskin, like a hangnail? Don't you fear that you will drown? And they say, this is the only game in town. And so I go to Mercy, and I wait for her to touch me, salt me, scrub, and feel me. I wait for her to heal me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So first of all, thank you so much. That was amazing.
Awesome.
And I thought it was so brave the way that you talk about, whether you're big enough to do this work. And so I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about the difference in your experience being an artist and being a performer. And even though it causes anxiety to do this work in a body that is not as big, right? Whether or not there's also like a privilege that comes from performing in this body, and kind of how you've thought about that in terms of the work that you're trying to do on body and the way that we think about women more broadly.
Thank you for such a thoughtful question. It's complicated. I guess I don't have very many rules for myself or for hopefully others. Fingers crossed, guys. But one of the ones I do have is I try to resist the need to answer questions with finality. One of my practices is I try to be open and let things evolve. And so I guess my answer to that question has evolved. So when I first started losing the weight, I felt the same, right? I was the same person. And so I felt very entitled to do the piece. When I realized the anxiety it was causing in the audience, then I had a choice, right? That was the moment. It's like, okay, I can either engage with that anxiety and try and like acknowledge it and relate to it, or I can pretend I don't see it and just keep doing my poem that I'm so proud of, right? Or I can put it down. And the first time that it came up, I was lucky that I got to have a conversation, and it was a little bit like this, where I got to say, which felt very strange, but it's this qualifying moment of like, well, just so you know, I did used to be big enough to perform this poem. But it felt important for me to qualify it because without that, I wasn't comfortable with what I imagined might be the experience other men too, right? And I would love to hear from some of the men, just because I know that this is not only a female experience, though it is often talked about that way. But, having been a big woman, like I didn't want to engage with that. I didn't want, it's funny, like, because as a white woman, as an American, I'm already at the top of the power structure, right? I already have more privilege than 99% of the world. Now that I'm a smaller woman, I just went even higher. And even though inside of my heart, I don't feel that way. I don't walk around with my privilege. I don't feel like that. One of the hard things about being a grown-up and trying to be a responsible grown-up and artist is having to be like, it doesn't fucking matter if I feel like that or not. It's true. It's true because it's my experience in the world. I can now walk down the street and have certain experiences that when I was bigger, I didn't have. I am being protected from a whole level of bullshit just because I am no longer like even just at an airport, I mean, that's an area where you see a lot of people get really weird about bigness, right? It's sitting on a small plane. And I can tell you, I remember when I could sit comfortably, like when I first lost enough weight that I was like, oh my God, I flew and I was like, I can sit in this seat. I remember the first time that I could comfortably cross my legs and stay that way. Those were moments, you know? But now for me, I make a choice. I don't want to, it's more important to me now, I guess, to be responsible about engaging in community. So now the only way that I will perform this poem is in the context like this, where we can have the conversation. I won't perform it without the conversation. And I also don't think it has any impact without the conversation. Because to me, what's really, you know, poems, great, fine, whatever. It might move you, and awesome. I write them, all right, whatever. But I'm actually, you know, my evolution of an artist has been that, like, I'm not really interested in art without conversation anymore either. I don't get a lot out of that. Did I answer your question? Okay.
I was wondering if you have interacted with, I feel like, at least I've encountered, like, this subculture. Maybe it's somewhat in the queer community, but it's like almost fat culture, and it's like a movement to, like, embrace fatness as an identity,
Totally.
you know, and just how in even choosing to lose weight instead of whatever, just what your thoughts are interacting with that.
So when we talk about culture, it gets tricky, right? Because I'm not an academic. I have great admiration for academics, and I often think and try and talk like one and engage in that way, but I'm aware that I don't always have the backup, right? But again, but the strong opinions are there. But in my experience, what I've noticed observing the world is that I think that's true. I've seen that absolutely in queer culture. I've seen it in brown female culture and black female culture. I have not personally experienced it in white American female straight culture. White straight American women, I am not aware of any kind of cultural movement around being big and proud. It doesn't feel, it feels like the edge of what that cultural image, that feels like the marginalized experience of it. I tried it. That's what I thought I was doing, right? That's what I thought I was doing when I wrote Big Woman. I thought I was like, you know what? Because I've known individuals, totally. I absolutely know individual women and men who have that of just being like, this is me, baby. You know, white, black, otherwise. Individuals get to do whatever they want. Culturally, I haven't noticed a trend around that. I thought that if I presented myself with enough conviction that I could outside in work my way toward a place of self-acceptance. It didn't, you know, for me, bigness is about more than just my size. And I didn't really understand that until I got smaller and still felt really too big. You know, it's about height. It's about loudness, right? It's about my ability to project. It's about my energy. It's about the types of choices I've made with career and with how I interface in the world. It's about being an oldest sibling, right? There's like so many ways in which those things manifest. And I happen to have enough of them that, like, even if, you know, if I became a stick figure, I think I'd still be projecting as a big woman to some degree. So I love it. I like the idea of it, you know, and then I think now I guess I am noticing more of a trend of just like, so I think of this as like staring at the sun. Staring at the sun is like, size is everything. It's all this specific thing. We're going to talk about and look about the thing. Compared to, you know, if I stare at the sun, I will blind myself. I can't actually know the sun by staring at it. This was not for me. Paula Vogel said this at a workshop I went to, and I was like, I'm going to use that every day, and I do. Because it's so good. But like, so she said, she was like, don't write a play about the sun. You can't stare right at it. She's like, if you want to write a play about something, look at what it's shining on and then write about that. What's illuminated by the thing that you want to see? And then look at that. Talk about that. Because every time I try and like pin my finger on it, it moves, right? It moves. And so I'm interested in those ideas. So the reason I was saying that is what I'm noticing now in terms of moving, like if we don't look right at the sun, but if we look right next to it, I think there's maybe a cultural softening around size. You know, it's annoying. Look, I'm going to talk about Dove. Okay, Dove, look, good for Dove, right? Good for Dove, because if you have a big vat of red paint and you want to make it purple, you can't drop in one red drop and one blue drop and make purple. You have to dump in blue. So you have to get it wrong. You actually have to go too far if you want to go faster. So this whole idea, and this is, again, affirmative action. Sorry, now you know what I think about everything. But, you know, it's like, you actually can't be like, well, why can't you on paper look the same and I on paper look the same, and why does color matter? Because if you want to make it purple, you have to dump it in. It takes a minute. You have to dump it in. And so this is what I think is kind of happening with Dove, is like they're dumping in the blue, trying to make shit purple. And meanwhile, I'm like, it's still the wrong question. They're like having, I don't know if you guys have seen this, those of you online probably have, but like they have two doors. They put up signs. One says average, one says beautiful. And then women, mostly, are the ones in these ads, are walking up to like a bank, and one door says beautiful and one says average. And then you have the moment of truth. How do you self-identify? Are you going to go through the beautiful door, or are you going to go through the average door? And then it's this thing of like, oh, I guess I'm average, right? Or like, you know what, fuck it, I'm feeling beautiful today. By the way, I did not ask if I was allowed to swear, so just saying. So please don't blame them if you're finding it a little much. So anyway, but the point is like, for me, I find that problematic because it's still like, see, you can feel beautiful even if you're XYZ. That's problematic. That's problematic. But we got to make it purple. So maybe we need to do that a little and then you know, get into the nuance.
I'm actually from South Africa, and then I was so excited that you went to Uganda. So, in my country, like, people will make fun of pretty much everybody. Like, if you're skinny, they'll make fun of you. If you're fat, they'll make fun of you. Like, they'll just,
totally.
Or like, it's normal, you know, like, people will just say whatever that they want to say about you. But it was really interesting when I came to America that, you know, being skinny was like, you know, it's good. And then, like, you will tell somebody, if you feel like somebody's getting skinny, you'll be like, oh, you're getting skinny. But if somebody's getting fat, you'll be like, oh, don't talk about that. So it's really interesting to me that, is it a culture itself that, you know, not talking about it kind of make it bad? Or, like, not saying the word you're fat, like, make it kind of, I don't know, what do you think about that?
I love that you brought this up because I actually go to Uganda every year. And so I have a lot of friends in East Africa in particular. But I also was once in Mauritania in West Africa, which is a totally different culture than in Uganda and East Africa. But I noticed in both places huge differences. I get to Uganda and they're like, Andrea, but you're so fat. And I'm like, ah, and they're like, you know, I know it's you. I keep doing it to you. I'm sorry. But they're just like, oh, you Andrea. Like, you know, and then I lost some weight. Yeah, you need a little on that side. You know, and I lost some weight, and it's like, Andrea, do you need to eat something? And if you come in plump, they're like, yeah, like you're looking good. Eat some portion, have some more cornmeal. We want to fatten you up because it's beautiful there. It's beautiful because, and again, like, look, we can go way back and be like, oh, it means you're well-fed. It means you're healthy, right? Like, we can afford to think that thin is sexy. Nobody else can in the world, pretty much. So that has definitely been my experience there. And like, and also I work with the special needs community. So this is amazing because the brilliant thing about working with people with cognitive differences is that there's all kinds of rules that are being broken all the time, right? So one of my favorite stories when I was bigger, and this felt, I included in a cultural conversation because it is cultural to me, right? You know, as I'm sitting with my young friend, he's like maybe 15 or something, and he experiences autism. He's very verbal, you know, but just very literal and very direct. And I was bigger at the time, and I sat down next to him at a party, and he looked over at me and he goes, well, Andrea, I can see that you're pregnant. You know, and it's just like, so, like, yeah, these are the moments where I'm just like, well, what? But I love that because it's so against the rules. It's so against the rules. It's the thing that we only ever, you know, here in neurotypical culture and American culture, we only ever hear tiny little kids doing it right before their parent drags them away. You're not allowed to talk like that, right? And we just recently in our family had a really interesting thing happen. I have 5.5-year-old twin niece and nephew. And we were out having breakfast a few months ago on a patio. And let me go back up here. I just keep wanting to like climb into your laps. We were having breakfast on a patio, and you know, we're in Stapleton, we're at Udi's, and we're like eating. And all of a sudden, Isabella, my niece, screams, stands straight up in her chair, looks across the street, and screams, "It's a tiny man!" And I'm with my mother and my sister-in-law and my brother, and and we're all just kind of like, oh my God, like what? So we all turn, but kind of like, what is happening, right? And across the street, I see nothing, and I'm like, where's the tiny man, right? So she's like this, she's fixated. Just wait. I'm like, so there's a car parked across the street. So I'm waiting, and sure enough, a little person walks over. It was behind the car, and I couldn't see him. So many thoughts, so many things happened in that moment, right? So she's transfixed, and what's amazing is that at that age, at 5, she could understand that it was not a child. She could see that it was not a child, right? That it was a grown-up who was much smaller than a grown-up she'd ever seen. And a couple things happened, and this is all of us. This is me. This is all of us, right? My sister-in-law was like, shh, right? Hand down. My mother was like, God love you. God love us all. My mother was like, Isabella, we don't stare, right? We don't point. Okay, these are things that we do. We all did it. Everybody kind of jumped in, and then I was just like, because in my family, like, we're kind of hilarious in the sense that we're all like, we're totally mainstream, like typical American culture, but we're really all vying, right? We're everybody in my family, all of us, we're like all vying to be a little bit more awake. I'm like making my mom buy like black Barbies, and instead of just white, like we're just it's a lot, So, okay, I know. People are like, really, you're going to talk about that? Yeah, I'm going to get into it. So, but what happened was, I had this moment of like, I saw it and I realized everything in that moment. I was like, this is it. I was like, she had the thing that happens to every single one of us that never goes away, which is the thing that says, I see difference. I perceive something other than me. I perceive an otherness. I only know me, and I know me all the time, but I just perceived something other than me, and I shall announce it in some way, right? And then the socialization begins of wherever you are. So, in Uganda, it was different. It's like the things that they're whispering about, we're as Americans, we would die because we're like, why are you whispering? Why is that a secret? And we're dying. We think it's hilarious. And they're like, you cannot talk about that. We're like, okay, right? And meanwhile, they're like, you're so fat. And I'm like, you're killing me. Like, you're not allowed to call people fat, So I guess what I learned from that moment in particular, and that one I just drove it home for me because I realized I was like, I guess in terms of, I can't change the whole world, right? I can't transform my culture. But I realized I was like, oh, if I want to activate a difference in myself around this, what I can start trying to do, and it's easier, I guess, in our line of work because the company I have where we work with people with special needs, we have that opportunity a lot of being around difference. But what's been activated in me is this idea of like being open about difference, letting it be okay to acknowledge it, but trying to separate the acknowledgement from the judgment of it, right? That's the difference. And so it's much easier, like if we're a parent, I don't have my own children, but with the twins, it's much easier for me to be like, oh, this is a teachable moment, right? Let's talk about genetics. And they're like 5, they're so done. As soon as I start, they're done. And I'm just like, wow, but, and I guess, and that's it. And that's why I said early at the beginning that I'm like, I don't really do answers because you just can't fix that. Like we can't fix that. We can't make our culture kind of less self-absorbed. But I guess I can try and be less self-absorbed, right? And what I appreciate about my friend, and that was interesting because the friend who told me you haven't always looked like that burned. It hurt. And she did me a favor because she called out my lie. She was like, I'm actually, as your friend, I can't be here and let you tell that story. Like that narrative is actually not real. And it was gentle, but I still, it wasn't polite. And, politeness can kill us all. So I got to cut it off somewhere, right? That's probably good.
Andrea, can I ask you to just talk a little bit more about your work with special needs adults and the relationship between that and art?
Totally, because it's crazy. Well, so my business partner and some of the other members of our company are here today, so it's kind of cool. But so, you know, I fell into it sideways. Like I went to theater school, okay? Like I have an acting degree. And then, but my mom's best friend used to be a program director at this camp for kids with special needs. So one summer, they needed a last-minute counselor. So she called my mom and she's like, I need your daughter to come and work at this camp. And I was like, I don't think I know how to do that. Like, I'm not trained in that. Because I had this idea, like we all do, that we have to be trained to do anything, right? That there's this specialization, that we all need specialized skills in order to be a person. And so she was like, you're going to be fine. Like, you're a theater person. Just roll with it. So, which is totally true. And all those people who said that a theater degree was a waste of time, boy, were they wrong. Okay? Thank you very much. I'm taking mine all the way to the bank. But, so that's how I like first got in, and I was really scared, and I, you know, but because I was an artist too, and so for a long time I just thought everything was separate. You know, I thought, oh, well, in this I do this here, and I do this here, and over here I have a photography company, over here I do this, and but what I learned, I guess, that kept bringing me back as an artist is it's just sort of, you know, for me, my quest as an artist is for authenticity. I mean, you can see that my work is all about my own personal truth. I am always trying to tell my story to the best of my ability, the bravest version of it that I can. And, you know, I learned that from that work. And I guess what happened now, so now the Wayfaring Band, we're not a musical band at all. No music played. No singing, no musical instruments. But we travel. We take these really kick-ass road trips, and we work primarily with young adults and up. So anybody from like 18 years old up, and people who experience Down syndrome and autism and cerebral palsy and all different kinds of cognitive and developmental differences. And we travel, and we try and have like adventures and, you know, the normalizing experience of not you're going to be like me, but we're going to do this thing that people do, right? And we're not going to do it the same way. But the art piece, the first 6 months, we were just, it was separate again. It was like, I'm going to do that in this world while I still make my art over here. But then we started thinking about it, and I was like, we're trying to make this like big cultural shift in perception around difference, right? We're trying to like use this company to highlight that, like, here we are. We're getting out of the little padded white rooms, okay? We're not going to be padding envelopes anymore in a corner. We're coming out and we're exploring the world. And we want people to see us, and we want them to talk to us, engage with us. And I was like, yeah, as an artist, my experience was that, like, I'm always clawing at the door. Let me in, let me in, let me in. Take me seriously. You know, give me a real job. Pay me real money, you know, like just always like trying to be like, let me in. And here I found this whole community of people who were like, let me in, let me in, let me in. And so we started talking about, you know, what would it be like if instead of being like, let me in, we were like, come on in. Let's flip it. If we want, you know, so for us, it's like our value is inclusivity. We value being included. But so we have to practice that by welcoming. So we practice hospitality. We'll say, you can come in. We're practicing the thing that we want other people to do. We're trying to model it. And I started thinking about artists. And I was like, artists are probably one of the only groups on the planet that you don't have to explain this to. You don't. You don't have to tell an Israeli and a Palestinian artist, like, you guys should totally be friends. They're like, we've been collaborating since 1975. We've been working on this giant wall, and the wall is about walls, and this, you know? It's like, you don't have to tell artists to do that. They're already fixing all the shit that the rest of us fuck up, right? They're making that social commentary. They're building those bridges. And so actually, where in most worlds, I think people are like, what do we do with artists? In our world, we take an artist in residence on every single trip that we take. So an artist comes on full scholarship, totally paid. They come with us, and their job is to be a member of the band like anybody else, but they also provide us with an ode to our adventure in whatever medium they want. So, you know, for us, it's storytelling. It's like, we're trying to do a big thing. Artists actually do it better. And I just think it's hard because, you know, if you call it advertising, everyone's like, oh, yeah, right. And it's just unfortunate that a lot of our great artists have ended up in advertising, right? Because that's the highest paying form of storytelling. truly, yeah.
You touched a bit about big personalities, and I wonder whether your personality changed through your journey and what you think about our culture in terms of women and having big personalities and what's expected of us.
It's the funniest thing because literally 2 days ago, I came up with a whole new plan about how I was going to change my personality again. I was talking to like a girlfriend of mine last night, and I was like, get this. I was like, I just came up with the greatest new old plan about how I'm going to change my personality. Because I have tried so many times to change my personality. I keep failing at it. I will continue to fail. I think that's the rule about personalities. But literally, in my hours of need and darkness, the thing that I always come back to, and it's fresh every time. Every time I like think it's the first time I've thought of it. I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I just need to get into a quiet space. I'm just, like, guys, this is me. I'm doing me. This is real. Like, I'm just going to go, you know what? I'm going to take it easy. I'm just going to take it easy. I'm just going to, I'm going to like wear more headphones and like, I'm going to like listen to music at work. I just need to be softer. And I feel like I'm all edges. I'm all angles. I'm just going to take it easy, and I'm going to be a little bit just, that was the version 2 days ago. It was like, that's literally what I decided I would do 2 days ago as a solution to all of my problems. Now, there's a woman I work with who's my mentor, and in some particular areas of my life. And when I asked her to be my mentor, the reason I picked her was because I was like, oh my God, she's totally quiet. It's like, she's so quiet and smart and mysterious and dark. She's like Daria, right? For those of you who remember the woman I wanted to be, I was like, she's the one I want to work with because maybe she can teach me how to be her. That's not how it works, turns out. And when I was younger, now that the twins are getting older, I'm like freaking out, like all these memories come back of like being young, and I remember when I was like 7, I changed my name. And I think a lot of us do those kinds of things, but I like changed my name. I was like, I need a more feminine, like Andrea is actually pretty feminine, but because I didn't feel feminine, I thought, I need a more feminine name, and I was like, what would an easy grown-up talk about? Easy. Okay, I have this perception I'm definitely not easy. I was like, oh, an easy grown-up would talk about television. So I was like I remember being like 7 and like sitting with like a bunch of like the cousins at like the kids' table and like having some fake conversation about televisions, not television, televisions. Right, yeah. And so yeah, like over the years, like my desire to change my personality has not diminished. But thank God there is a universal grace that keeps protecting me from doing anything actually serious that would actually do that. Because I am like in my moments of clarity aware that when I can like pierce through the veil of all of my yearning to be someone else, and I have been called out by dear friends and mentors about this, I am aware that I have very unique gifts. I am aware that I have things that other people covet. And it's very easy for me to lose sight of that and to forget that. And I am aware that because of my personality, I am able, like for my job, I am aware that like it's because of that that we are able to do some of the work that we've been doing. And, on a very just like super heart open personal place, part of my like adult process in my dark moments has been like, especially as I've like built a relationship with the spiritual, because I didn't have that growing up. And like as I've gotten to know God, like the scary conversations I have with God are like, do you want me to be alone? Like, is that the cost? Is that the cost of bigness? Like, am I supposed to be alone? Is there no fit for that? And then I counter that with, even Martin Luther King had a wife. And that's like how I kind of come out of that self-centeredness, right? Fuck, I'm getting into all kinds of shit I didn't think I'd get into, but I think we're there.
Andrea, thank you so much for a wonderful performance.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Oh, you're here. Yay.